Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Coffee with Convery, where we caffeinate your curiosity with bold stories, actionable insights, and fresh takes on how we define and design success. Today's guest is a leader in AI innovation, a keynote speaker, and an advocate for mental health and resilience. Please welcome TJ Walia, creator of the PWR-AI Framework, former Microsoft leader, and passionate mentor helping professionals and entrepreneurs thrive without burning out. TJ's journey is one many can relate to. After 15 years of corporate success, he hit rock bottom in 2021 with severe burnout and anxiety that forced him to completely rebuild his life. From that moment, he transformed his struggle into a system, one that now helps thousands, harnessing AI, protecting their mental health, and accelerating their careers and business sustainability. Whether you're a student entering the workforce, a young professional feeling the pressure to be on, or a man navigating the unspoken challenges around mental health, this episode offers real talk and real tools. TJ, welcome to the podcast.
Brian, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. When you sent me the request to join, I was super excited. I'm like, yes, I get to be on with Brian. So I was super excited, looking forward to this. Happy to jump right in.
Me too, me too. I'm very excited and thank you for being a part of it. So maybe some rapid fire questions, so just the audience gets to know you better. What do you consider your superpower?
Superpower. That's a good one. There's probably many small little superpowers that I have within, but I think one that I would probably gravitate towards is turning chaos into clarity. That is probably the biggest thing that I look at. A lot of people tell me I oversimplify things, or I can take something complex and really dumb it down in a way that everyone understands. And I think that would probably be the biggest superpower that I would lean towards.
Amazing, amazing. So we have a lot of listeners that are making that pivot from high school to first job to or post-secondary to first job, and also a lot of people like pivoting and thinking about what their next move is. But one of the questions I often love to ask people is just when you got your start in school, what was your favorite subject?
That was an easy one for me. It was computers. I love
Computers.
technology. I'd fallen in love with technology since I was 13. So for me,
Nice,
I was always looking forward to that computer class.
amazing. And how about first jobs? We all start somewhere, whether it's scrubbing dishes or mowing lawns or whatever it might be. But what was your very first job?
I would say there's two aspects of it. First, official job where I actually got paid was telemarketing. That was a really good one. I found that I had a strong, I guess I had strong communication skills early on. And so telemarketing, and I didn't realize it at the time, but that's what I got hired in for. Unofficial was working in my dad's retail business, helping him with everything from stocking, shelving, merchandise to deliveries, you name it. So it was a lot of that. So really understood customer service at a whole
Yeah,
other level watching dad do it.
yeah,
But they all turn into lessons, over the years that I can gravitate and towards and learn from and share from.
amazing. Yeah, all those experiences are lived experiences that help you in the journey that we're on here. So thank you for that. If you had to describe yourself in one word, what might that be?
Ooh, one word. Um, if I had to describe myself in one word, I would probably say God, there's a lot of them going through right now, and I only have to pick one. I would say learner. I love getting behind something that intrigues me and then just ripping it apart, like get to the core, and really understand why it works in a certain way. So I go deep. Yeah, I would say learner. Learner is probably
Yeah,
the one word.
yeah, lifetime learner is a good thing. I know
Yeah,
that's two words, but I just
yeah.
added one for you. All good, all good. So let's jump into it. Your story is fascinating. It's got so many ins and outs and things to share. So let's start with maybe the breaking point. In 2021, you faced some severe burnout, something many men and professionals quietly battle. Can you share what led you to that point and what was the first steps of recovery and what did that look like?
Yeah, I wish it was a simple answer of what led there,
Yeah.
but if I were to put it together, my initial run-in with burnout was actually in 2014.
Okay.
And I think that's where the story really started from. And it came out of nowhere, Brian. It was a weekend of just running around. We'd come from a funeral, and that was in London. So it was a bit of a drive. You know, emotions were high, everything else. And I remember Sunday night getting back at about, I think about 11 p.m. that night. And then I worked until about 2 a.m. because I had meetings on Monday morning that I had to go towards and getting up the reports finalized, getting everything in order. And I show up at this meeting, and this is how it's been for the past 5, 10 years, right? You just keep going, 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 nothing stops. And so I'd load up on my coffee in the morning because that's the only way I'm going to be able to, get through the day essentially. And so I did my first morning meeting, and everything was fine, but I still felt a little off, and I figured it's just lack of sleep. I'm tired. My second meeting, Brian, it was a lunch meeting, and I'll never forget this. We're at a Moxie's in Richmond Hill, and I would take my clients there all the time.
Right.
We're sitting down, and I think within 2 minutes into the conversation, I started feeling really weird, and I didn't know what it was at the time, and nor did anyone else. And I'm like, something's not right. Like it's not sitting with me. My heart was pacing. I was very, I guess, on the edge, if you will. I was like, something's not right. Like this is what's going on. And it got to a point where I could no longer hear what the
Wow.
person right in front of me. There were about 5 or 6 executives from the company I was working with there at the time, and I couldn't hear a single word they were saying. Like it wasn't making sense to me anymore. There's confusion, but I could hear all the noise in the restaurant, and it was super loud. And I'm like, something's not right. So I asked to excuse myself from the meeting. I said, guys, like I'm just gonna run to the men's room, and I'll be right back. The moment I scooted out of that bench there, the last thing I remember is just everything going dark, and I hit the floor. I had no idea what happened. I fainted at that meeting, and luckily for me, I'm not a big guy, so they were easy, able to. And you've seen me in person, so they were able to, pick me up, put me back on a bench. I have no idea that this all happened.
Wow.
And when I came back, I see everyone's around me, and I think that was a starting point of the burnout, and the recovery from that was in a lot of different components. We had a lot of emergency room visits, thinking there's something wrong, but it all turned out to be anxiety. And I didn't know what anxiety was at the time or what I was dealing with, but I had a severe panic attack at that moment where my body just shut down. And today I can joke that I tell my kids, I'm like, sometimes I'm a possum. When things get overloaded, I kind of faint and pass out. but but the reality is that was the journey I went through. But that time period, I think, was one of the darkest times of my life because I went borderline depression. I went into a dark room, didn't talk to my family. I love my kids dearly, and I didn't want to be around them at that time. I didn't want to be around anyone, not my friends. And it was tough to get out of that. However, there was a point or a turning point where I saw my wife lose hope in my recovery. And she would just come into the room, and this is where I'd sit for like months. I think it was like about 2 or 3 months. I sat in this room, didn't socialize, didn't get out, didn't talk to anyone, and the room was dark. Just either watch TV or did something, but there was no motivation, there was no drive. Everything was gone because after that moment, I lost my confidence to even speak to anyone. So that was the other aspect of it. And I remember my wife coming in and just handing me a tray of food, and as she's walking out, that look in her eyes, Brian, I'll never forget that. It was like almost like of giving up. And I
Mm.
called her back and I said, I need your help. And she turned around in a second. I was like the first time I kind of had a proper conversation with her in a long time. And
Right.
she's like, anything. I'm like, I don't want to be like this. I need to get out of this. And and I think that was my turning point initially,
Yeah.
where the next morning, so a guy who can't get out of bed, he can't get out of his room. I was at the gym at 5:30 in the morning, Brian.
Mm.
And I'm like, I've got to change this. So I started with sleeping better, started with working out. And there's four components I attribute to it. So working out, sleeping better, eating better, and then meditation. I think a combination of those four really helped me discover who I was even better again. And I got back up on my feet. Getting back up on my feet within 8 months, going back to work, I actually got promoted. So it came in on full swing. I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go at this. So now fast forward to 2021 and 2022 timeframe. I had a very, very toxic manager. So the person that I had who brought me in or had hired me initially was very supportive, but I can't control who my manager is going to be. So within a few months of me getting into role, he got promoted and left, and someone else came in, and that conversation changed everything. So having a leader who doesn't see your potential really, really can have an impact. So I started going down that same path again of trying to prove myself, trying to prove who I am, trying to make sure that this individual sees my worth. And I think it was the year I had worked the hardest in my entire life. And despite that, despite doing all the work, despite my customers appreciating the work I've done, despite having the KPIs being met and exceeded, I was told I didn't have enough impact. And that really took a toll on me. Because when you're a performer at that level,
Oh yeah.
and someone comes in and says and diminishes everything you've done and says it equates it to zero, even if I had a small, portion of a bonus that would have come in and said, hey, you know what, good effort, but this is what we're expecting. But to wipe that plate out entirely and say there was nothing and not even explain or justify. And I mean, I went to HR, I escalated and everything else, but the support wasn't there. So that really took an impact. And I actually thought at one point it was me. I thought I'd lost that ability to perform at that level again. And so the whole thing started coming back. Anxiety started going up. Panic attacks slowly started creeping in. And once that started happening, I didn't get the support I needed or I was looking for. And I knew I didn't want to be in that same situation in 2014. So I asked for help. I reached out, but I don't think people understood and people really don't understand what an individual is going through. You can explain or you can say I've got anxiety or I'm having a bit of a panic attack or I'm not feeling well in this. It's very short-lived because everyone's so in it for themselves, for the business, for what they're doing. So the support they give you is very standardized. It's almost like a
Surface
one size
level.
fits all. Yeah, it's very surface level and standardized. Like if someone has anxiety, oh, go do this. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Anxiety and stress for every individual is very different. Their lives are different. Their journeys are different. What triggers them is different. So I didn't see that support. And in 2022, so it started in 2021, as you mentioned. In 2022, I hit that point again where I had a severe panic attack on a flight. And I literally, I guess, with the pressure and all the other factors in the air, I passed out. And that was it. I was like, never again.
Mm-mm.
I'm not going to put myself through this again. And I decided this is the time to leave corporate.
Yep. Wow.
So that's essentially how that journey unfolded.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for being so raw and vulnerable in your storytelling with this situation, because I know it must also bring back those feelings, even talking about it. Trauma like that comes back and people feel those things all over again. But sharing your story, I imagine there's many listeners out there thinking similarly. They may be in a certain part of their life or time frame where they're going through similar things, right? And maybe at different scales or different
Yeah,
levels, but by sharing your story, I appreciate it because it also helps others think about what they might be facing and what can actually be possible down the road from some of
absolutely.
this.
And I
So,
think one thing I'll add is we don't listen to our bodies enough.
no,
Our body tells us what's working and what's not. But what we try to do is we mask it. I'm
yeah,
okay. I'll be fine. I'll get through this. Here's another coffee, right?
yeah,
We have to stop doing that. We have to
Yeah,
listen to the signals that our body gives us.
100%, 100%. So how do we move towards the framework you created as a result of this lived experience? And you've been able to help thousands manage productivity without sacrificing their mental well-being. And how has that system not only changed your own life, but your clients' life?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think part of who I am, and we talked about what I really enjoy is learning, but
Right.
the other aspect of that learning is enabling. I love enabling others. I love seeing people perform at their potential because I've been at a point where I know what my potential is, but I can't perform there for whatever various reasons, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, whether it's lack of understanding, whatever those variables might be. So for me, unlocking that for people has always been just very fascinating. So I'll go back to the 2014, 2015 time frame, and I shared kind of I got promoted within 8 months. And how that happened was it's not that I wasn't feeling anxious anymore or the anxiety wasn't there. It was I really found a different way to do work. So I started getting super efficient, super productive. And having taught myself this new skill set, I started then going back and sharing it with my peers because for me, it was like, okay, I understand this. If this makes my life better, I'm sure there are many others that are facing or experiencing a similar situation, but no one talks about it, no one says it, and uh, and the demand that started happening for my and I called it inbox zero at the time was really productivity training on how do you get efficient, how do you get effective on managing your day and executing. I was working anywhere from 4 to 5 hours a day and I still got promoted, whereas all my peers were working anywhere from 10 to 12 hours a day and they were still struggling. And so that feedback came in from them and they're like, TJ, like we're drowning and you're going out and helping other people. Like, how are you doing this? And that's when I started sharing my training initially, and that training was the productivity training that I really started showcasing what people could do. And I was actually invited by so many different teams across the world at Microsoft outside of my day-to-day work and my job to say, can you come and enable our teams? And it got to a point where it would be batches of 40, 50, then a couple hundred. And then they have Microsoft has learning days every month. And then I'd be invited to learning days. So can you showcase this? And people would come in and learn. And it got to the point, and this is back in 2022 again, when I'm still going through the challenges, but I'm also sharing, the learnings. There was a one session that I did, Brian. We were expecting about 500 or 600 people to join that session. I was like, it's probably going to be one of my bigger sessions. This is all after COVID, and I didn't realize how much everything had amplified the productivity, lack of productivity rather, the work ethics and the behaviors had all changed and transformed. So we're expecting about 500 to 600 people joining this session. We ended up having 7,000 people join this session, and this invite went in viral internally. So for a guy who has panic attacks from time to time, when I saw all these people on the call, I'm like, this is not good. So I had a mini panic attack, but again, we mask it.
Yep.
We don't show it, and I got through it, and that's kind of how I've dealt with now anxiety in a way that it's more psychological. So for me, it's like we're good. Let's get past the stage, and then we'll assess. And then as soon as I got into the flow, I forgot about the anxiety. I forgot everything, and I was performing the way I'm supposed to. But that was part of the learning and how I share back. So when I went through all of this, there were three components that came out of my PWR framework, or the Power AI framework that I call. And the first one was purpose. So that's what the P stands for. It's like, what is our purpose? What are we doing? The second one is well-being. And then the third one is readiness. And if any one of these, I look at this as a three-legged stool. If any one of these are off, you fall off. So if you have purpose and you know the direction you're going and you know what you want to do, but your well-being and mental health isn't there, you go nowhere. Or you have purpose and your well-being is there, but you don't have the tool set and all the resources to execute. You fall off again. So there has to be a balance amongst all three of these. And that's what I discovered. So every time I had burnout or faced hurdles or challenges, I started reflecting back. And so going back to the learning aspect, what caused it? What was I missing so that it doesn't happen again? So I don't repeat it. And that's what I realized is these three. And so for me, anytime now, if I'm going down that path, because life continues to go on and you have different hurdles and different challenges that will resurface. And the interesting thing about anxiety is it's not the same every time. Once you learn how to handle one aspect of it, it shows up in another way. And then it shows up in another way. So for me, it's been these three that really go back and say, okay, am I headed in the right direction? Yeah, this is exactly where we're going. Okay, so what's missing? Do I have the right tools? Am I overworking myself? No, that's all good too. Am I getting enough exercise? Am I eating well? Is my well-being in check? No, I've dropped off the meditation. I've dropped off the working out. Okay, let me get that back in again. Or my sleep has been off. Let me
Mhm.
get that back on the radar again. So those three for me have been essential. And sharing that back with a lot of other folks, it also helps them align and say, okay, this is where things are working well. So when any of these components are off, your anxiety, your stress levels can go up, essentially. And that's what I help them bring down and tone back in.
Yeah, that makes a lot of practical sense, but actually putting it all together and then executing on each part, there's a lot of complex pieces to that, right?
Absolutely. And it was, a good 10, 15 years in the making as
Yeah,
well, right?
yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. The next thing I want to dive into is men, mental health, and the modern workforce. You recently have joined Dudes That Dine for Men's Mental Health, which has been something I've invested in to provide a space for these types of conversations to happen. And I think too often, men are faced with, well, be more like a man, or stiff upper lip, or whatever you want to talk about. And I know having you in the group and what you're giving to the group as well is incredible. But if I think about sort of that group needing it, and even this past month where we had almost 35 people show up, like your 7,000, I said to myself, well, something's going on for 35 to show up, not 10 or 12, right? So when you think about men in leadership, high pressure careers, struggling to open up about mental health, what advice do you have to dudes or men about, how to get away from feeling trapped in that I can't slow down mindset, or I have to be more of a man, or I have to be whatever those cliche things that come up but actually impact us every day.
Yeah, it's a challenge I had to go through same way. And I think the biggest challenge is that we're always trying to live up to someone else's expectations.
Yeah,
And when you're living someone else's life, of course you're not going to be happy. Of course you're not going to be satisfied. And I think that was the biggest transformation for me. So it was really a mindset transformation where I came in and said, you know what? If I'm not healthy, if I'm not well, then what is the purpose of all of this? And what we come down to is, and I'll go back to 2014. The mindset I had was, I'm going to provide for my family. I'm going to do everything I can do for them. I'm going to make sure they don't suffer. I'm going to make sure my employer doesn't suffer. I'm going to be the best employee. All of the things that top notch. But everything I was trying to do, which is not be a burden on my family, not be a burden on my employer, perform really well, be top notch in every aspect, I ended up doing the opposite when I fainted. I became a burden for my family. I became a burden for my employer, my peers. They had to take over my accounts. My wife had to deal with me being at home as well as not being able to take care of the kids the same way. All of those factors that I was trying to protect them from, I ended up amplifying onto them. So it really came down to a learning of I have to put myself first. If I'm not well, then I'm not there to take care of them. So, as the airlines say, put your own oxygen mask on
right.
first. That's probably one of the pass out on that airline without an oxygen mask, then I can't help my kids. So if I can put mine on first, then I can help my kids. and my family or anyone else around me. So I think that's probably the biggest shift that we need to look at is we don't have anything to prove to anyone.
Right.
So we have to stop living a life that people have expectations for us. Instead, what is our parameters of standards of living? Where are we comfortable? When are we facing challenges? And then how do we seek help? How do we disconnect? How do we pull back and say, you know what? I'm done for today. And the
Yeah.
fast-paced corporate world doesn't allow that the same way because you still have to show up to these back-to-back meetings. And I remember, Brian, I would go to these meetings and I'd be shaking inside for no reason. It's not like I didn't know the work. I didn't know anything. I don't know what was triggering it. That's just the nature of anxiety. Something triggers something that causes you to have panic attacks. And you'd have to cameras on, you're having these conversations. And then I'm questioning, like, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And despite that, I'm like just shaking. And as soon as I get off the call, I'd have to go for a walk just to relieve myself.
Yeah.
And it's challenging. Sorry.
No, no worries. No. It makes me think too, like this is the advice we all need to be thinking about. I just know sometimes you get caught up in the day, the month, whatever. Because I also try to think about that, and people have asked me as well, like, how do you find time to put that oxygen mask on? How do you find time for yourself? Because the life we live is fast paced, right? It's you
Absolutely.
got whatever your situation is, kids, wife, job, family, partner. Um, and sometimes just saying I need time for myself or just even articulating it in a way to find the time for that
Yeah.
is it's not easy. It gets those seem to be like you try to set aside and that gets filled in with something else.
It is, and I think this goes back to the first P in the framework, which is the purpose. When we don't have a clear path of where we're going, it's easy for someone to say, and this happens at work, at home, and everything else. It's easy for someone to say, "Can you take this stretch project and work on this?" Or "Can you go pick up the kids and do this because I can't do it, or I don't feel like doing it?" Or "Can you go do this, task?" If we don't have a clear defined list of things we have to accomplish or do, then everything takes, big or small, will take that slot. But if you have a list and you have a plan that you're working towards and you have a direction, then it becomes easier to say, if it's your boss or employer, and say, you know what, I can definitely take on that task. However, there are these other three conflicting priorities. Which one do you want me to drop?
Mm,
And you put it back on them, right?
that's a good
So these
point.
stretch projects coming in. So that's where that purpose comes in. So when you know that direction, understand what you have in front of you, then you're very selective. I've only got this many hours. I have to get these three things done. This one has to take a back seat. Or can I delegate this to someone else? But it's when we don't have our own clarity that that starts happening. So we all have the same amount of time in a day.
Yeah.
You just have to get intentional of how do you build that plan for that day and how do you execute on that plan for the day.
I like the word intentional. I also like the fact that what when you were speaking, I was thinking we have to speak up
Yeah.
too, because they go hand in hand, right? Otherwise, you're just back to the sucking it up and doing everything. And yeah,
Well,
really great advice. Really great advice.
it's because we don't have clarity in our plan. Like if it's a given Saturday, let's say for example, and you're sitting around, any phone call that comes in, it might be a friend, it might be a buddy, it might be a relative, or and they say, hey, let's go grab some drinks. If you have nothing planned, of course you're gonna grab drinks. But on the flip side, if it's I've got five things to accomplish. I have this to do. Then I've got to take the kids to a birthday party. Then I've got to do this. Then I've got to do that. And then someone else's swimming lessons or whatever have you. Then it's hard for you to fill that in and say, listen, I can't do it today, or I can do it after 7 p.m., or can we do it tomorrow? Now you have the ability to negotiate. But once that slate is clean, you just fit everything in and you're not prioritizing yourself. So that's what you have to get really intentional. I'll go back to the word intentional because if you're not intentional, someone else is going to come in and take that spot, and they will. And I have, one of the things I taught in the my productivity training is your email is actually someone else's to-do list. So someone sends you an email saying, "Hey, Brian, I need help with this, this, and this." Well, they cannot complete their task without you coming in and supporting them. Now the question is Brian prioritizing their task and to-do list, or does Brian have a clear path on what he has to accomplish before he can go help someone else? And that's where the productivity shift happens. So rather than saying, "Yeah, let me jump on that right now," it's, "I've got 5 things on my plate. I'm going to tuck you in for next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Does that work?" Well, the other person will either come back with, "Yeah, that's cool," or, "No, this is super urgent. We have to get this done now." Then, well, I have to drop these 4 things out of my list here. And then you reprioritize, but you're still being intentional about what's happening rather than just giving up the space.
Absolutely. So thinking about young professionals starting out, there's quite a young audience to this podcast listening, and they might be stepping into their first job, their first leadership roles. What advice would you give them about managing expectations, protecting their own mental health, to set themselves up for long-term success? Because there's a lot of that expectation coming in preset, but also they have to own it, right? You have to own your own career, you have to own your own success. So thoughts around advice for young professionals?
Yeah, I think I'll go back to my own self. I wanted to be a part, I went to work at Microsoft since I was like 13, 14 years old when I got into tech. I had such a passion for that company. And coming in, when I joined Microsoft, I thought this was it. I had tied my own identity to the brand.
Mm,
Probably the biggest mistake I made. And a lot of professionals make this mistake because then they don't see any other world outside of that. So be intentional again of joining a company, doing what you need to. Yes, there's excitement. Yes, there's going to be, your first job or your first amazing career opportunity. But be intentional and say, "Is this me or is this a part of me?" And
mm.
so that me
Great
has to
advice.
come at the top, and the organizations and the roles are pillars within that identity, not the other way around. And that's what we have we forget. And a lot of folks who I talked to today, a lot of high performing professionals from organizations like Microsoft, Intel, Amazon, that I coach and I work with, the hardest thing is untethering themselves from the brand. So we all fall into that trap because we think, "Ah, we've been here 15 years, 20 years, that this is my identity." It's not. That's a chapter. It might be a longer chapter or a shorter chapter for others, but it's just that, a chapter in your life.
I
And that's
think
what
we
we have
have
to
to,
understand.
what you're talking about is also breaking that programming, because that I
Yeah,
think we're all programmed to think that way too in some ways, shape, or form. Because I'm guilty of it too. And
absolutely.
when something ended at an organization, part of me ended, and I'm like, no, wait, hold on, right? Like, great advice on that. I love that idea because you're also going to work many jobs in your career and life. It's very different these days, gig work, whatever it may be. And so you're the core of what all that is, not the other way around. I love that. Thinking about AI, how about advancing sort of students, early career professionals? How can they use AI to advance their careers, do you think, these days? And look at it as a
It's
tool.
Yeah. Listen, the reality with AI. I was in a room last night, just doing a talk for one of the cities, and I asked a question. I said, it's we're in September, it's 2025. How many of you are actually using AI? And only 25% of the room raised their hand. And I was blown away by it. This technology is around us. And the reality is they're using AI, but they don't even know it. Netflix, your GPS systems, they're all using AI. It's being baked in, but they don't realize that they're using it. So it's being forced upon us. It's going to be a part of us. So what the role of AI is going to be is that it's going to give you a competitive edge. It's going to give you a competitive advantage that no one else is going to have.
Yep.
So the key is to learn this technology, understand it. Yes, it's adapting. Yes, it's changing, but that change is going to be, it's going to progress along with it. And the example I like to give usually when I'm doing my keynotes as well is like, are you waiting for the perfect iPhone, It's never going to happen, right? We're on number 17 now. Then it's going to be 18. There's always going to be iterations and changes. But if someone who started out and saying, I'll wait for, the perfect iPhone, and they never adapt, they've missed out. They don't understand the features of it. They don't understand the functionality. They don't understand how to use it. So that learning curve on the first time they go in is going to be very steep versus let's start using what's available. Let's get an iterative approach. And every new version teaches you something new, but it doesn't mean you've forgotten everything else that you've worked on. So you constantly keep learning and developing. That's the approach that I think people need to start looking at. Is you start adapting, jump in, and help it master your careers and the market, because otherwise it's not AI that's going to replace an individual. It's an individual using AI that's going to replace the individual.
Love that. Love that. Thank you for that. Let's turn a little bit towards career growth and marketing and sales as an example. I know you've had, strong career in that space as well. Leaders looking to be in those fields to achieve results, how can they stay more innovative and maybe future focused from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the reality is we're so busy, and I'll go back to intentionality. You have to be intentional in what you want. So it goes right back to that P and the purpose. Understand what your path is, map it out. What do you want to achieve? So for me, when I was going through burnout, I wanted to come into the entrepreneur world.
Yeah.
I documented that for myself. I wrote it down and I started building a plan around that. I was very intentional what I wanted to do. It didn't happen by fluke. A lot of people think, oh, well, you left Microsoft after 15 years or 20 years in corporate and you landed in your business and it's working. It doesn't happen that easily. Most businesses fail. So how was I able to differentiate that? I was very intentional, a lot of learning. So when I say, for individuals who are really looking at, how do you stay ahead? How do you innovate? How do you future focus? One is be intentional. And the second component that a lot of people don't realize is building a personal brand.
Mm.
It is far more important than a resume today than it ever was. I'm, I teach people on personal branding and how do you stand out and how do you get promoted and how do you start a business and all that. And everything comes down to visibility. If you're not visible, they don't know you exist. There's so much noise in the market. So how do you carve out a niche or an area for yourself that you are the master in? And once you have that, then people know that you're known for this one or two things that represent X. But when they need someone for that, they come to you. So for me, as an example, even when I was within Microsoft, I had always seen myself, I was always brought in to clean up the mess. Always. Like that's just been uh my role in a lot of the areas that I was brought into, whether it was a certain industry, sector, job. It's like something's broken. Can you come clean this up? And that's what I started doing. And that's what I was known as, seeing gaps, seeing opportunities in areas that were broken and fixing it. And those are the biggest transformative opportunities. Because when things are working, all you're doing is just, okay, just keep driving the train. That's it. Let's let it keep going. Well, if it's about to derail and we've lost control, we've got to change the driver, then that's the role you come in with. And if you can stop that from derailing or be known for that, then you're called in every time. And that becomes the brand.
It's super interesting because as you're talking through this personal brand and strengths, it reminds me how two things have shifted in the past. I remember being coached and mentored on, focus on your weaknesses and try to get them to be strengths. And actually, I really didn't do that because I thought, why am I going to waste so much time over here? If you're a collaborative team, you can have people do that. And so I think that's a huge lesson from what you just said too, is you can be known for something and that can be your thing, or things. Right? And if that's your strength, just keep continuing to perfect it. I felt like that advice of focusing on your weaknesses kind of detracted from that for me personally. So I kind of took that advice and went one ear out the other. But I remember hearing it, right? Like,
I had the same path. I used to do a whiteboard session with myself every 6 months in my career. It's like, okay, where am I now? What are my gaps? What gaps do I have to fill? And I was constantly figuring out or fixing the gaps. I
Yeah.
never focused on the strengths.
Right.
And for me to come into the entrepreneurial world, I flipped the script. I said, okay, what are my strengths? What can I do? And all of a sudden, there's a huge list of things I've accomplished, the things I've done. I'm like, why was I always focused on the gaps? So I
Exactly.
stopped worrying about the gaps and just focused on the strengths. And that's what I executed on. Right. So that's what we have to flip the script on for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway from this conversation. Let's talk about your podcast focused on resilience and success. What inspired you to start it, and how can our listeners benefit from tuning into you there as well?
Yeah, it's that's an interesting one. I had envisioned that podcast, I think it was in 2019. I only got around to starting it in 2023, I believe it was. And it was really about all the work I'd seen in my career at Microsoft. And it was around seeing the average person work day in, day out, do everything, give it their all. And then there's one person that gets on stage and gets all the recognition. And I was like, this is not fair. How do we give the average person who helps put all this together
Yep.
a voice? And that's where T Talk started from. And it was really getting leaders that are not visible at that level, that they're showcased everywhere, but they're the ones that really help things happen. So those are the individuals I bring onto the podcast, just to hear about their journey, hear about their stories, hear about their success and their failures. And the benefits to the audience is that they're lessons. It's their journey, it's inspiration, that it is the average person. I'm okay. I'm enough to do what I'm doing. I don't have to be that individual who's on stage in front of thousands of people to say that, am I enough? It's
Yeah,
like, no, you can have your own journey in your own means, in your own terms, and still be satisfied.
100%. Well, I can't believe we're getting to the end of this discussion. It's been really inspiring and really thoughtful and mindful talking to you and hearing about your journey, but also the lessons you've learned and shared with our listeners. I just wonder if you had any one last thought of a takeaway or something you want to share with some of our listeners who may be going through a number of things right now. We know the world's heavy, but there's also light, right? So how do you lean into the light, and your thoughts around maybe what people should consider?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'll probably share, Brian, and I think one of them is it's okay to be where you are. We have to accept that. There's a term in our culture. It's called hookum, and hookum directly translated means the command. But when I dug deeper into it, it actually means reality. We have to accept the reality around us. There are things that we cannot change, and once we accept that, life becomes easier. I know we question things. We try to make sense of things. That's just how the brain is. The brain needs to have some sort of closure on things. But in some cases, there are things that are beyond us that we don't understand why they work the way they do, or why things happen to us the way they do. There was one individual that I heard say this, and he says, goes, if something that's happened to you has never happened to anyone else in the world, sure, I'd be upset. But if it's happening to others as well, and others are going through it, this is just part of life. And so that's one aspect. And the other aspect I think I would really focus on, and I kind of started with that, is that put your own oxygen mask on first, just like the airlines say. We have to take care of ourselves. And the moment we start doing that and we start accepting the reality around us and say, we're giving it our best, I don't want to go further than that. I can't go further than that. And that's okay. I need to take a break today. And I've had those days. There are days that I had back to back meetings, even in my own business at times. And I would move those meetings out, and I would go into my family room, lie down on the sofa. That's my happy spot. I'd lie down there with a blanket and take a nap.
Yep.
And my family understands that. And they know it's like, okay, dad needs a break. And that is okay.
Yep.
Right. So allowing ourselves to recover. And I teach my kids and my family the same thing. And it's like, if there are days that are overwhelming and they're tough, You need to disconnect, do it. Don't wait for someone to tell you to do it. Don't let your body to give in before you do it. And just say, it's okay. I'm going to disconnect and we'll take it up again tomorrow.
Great advice.
Or so.
Yeah, no, great advice. That's a wrap for today's Coffee with Convery. TJ, thank you for showing us that success doesn't have to come at the cost of mental health, and that building systems for resilience is not just possible, it's super powerful. I really want to thank you for being on the episode with me today.
It was an absolute pleasure to be here, Brian. So thank you very much for allowing me to come and share my experiences with your guests as well. So thank you.
Thank you. So, to our listeners, if this episode resonates with you, share it with a friend who might need to hear this. Subscribe to the podcast at coffeewithconvery.com. You can also follow us on Instagram for more stories that empowers both your career and mindset. This is Coffee with Convery, where we remind you that success isn't just about climbing the copper ladder. Sometimes it's about building your own jungle gym.